everyone. Thanks for downloading Taxpayer Beware. This podcast was created by the California Tax Education Council, or CTEC for short. CTEC is a nonprofit organization required by state law to basically do one task, and that's to protect you against fraud and help you find a California-approved tax preparer. By law, only an attorney, CPA, enrolled agent, or registered tax preparer with CTEC can charge a fee to do your taxes. Anyone who isn't one of these four is breaking state law, and there are thousands doing just that. I'm your host, Brandon Chanley. We have a lot to cover, so let's get started. They're a problem we keep seeing year after year. We call them ghost tax preparers. Every tax season, they'll hang a shingle over a tax preparation service, offering it for a low fee, or sometimes they even just use word of mouth to get business. Once April 15th comes and goes, they disappear like a ghost, leaving their victims to deal with their mess. Unfortunately, sometimes victims don't even know there's an issue until they get a notice from the IRS or the Franchise Tax Board a year or more later. Joining us today for Season 3 of The Scary Truth About Ghost Tax Preparers is Christella Sanchez with the IRS. She's a stakeholder liaison, has been with the IRS for 38 years. And we also have Rebecca Landeros with the Franchise Tax Board Enforcement Team is also joining us today. So it's great to see the two of you. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Hi, Brandon. Thank you for having me.
Rebecca's back. She didn't get enough, so she's back on again. This is great. So, Christella, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
Ghost tax preparers are an issue, and it's an issue that I think most taxpayers don't even understand it's an issue until they get that letter from the IRS or Franchise Tax Board reaches out to them. And then it becomes a major issue because the person that did their return's gone like a ghost. They can't find them. They can't get help with a possible scenario or situation, or it could be even worse and a major fraud was committed or something like that and they're gone, right? And at CTEC, we're trying to curb that as much as we can, with having preparers in the state be registered and do the things that are required to make sure the taxpayers in California are getting a good quality tax return finished and completed. And unfortunately, this ghost preparer could be ruining some of those things. So what do you guys say as a ghost tax preparer? How do you identify a ghost tax preparer?
Okay, I'll go ahead and start, Brandon, and I'll go back to what you just said about some taxpayers get hurt financially, because that is true. Most tax return preparers do provide outstanding and professional tax services. However, each year, some taxpayers, like you mentioned, are hurt financially because they choose the wrong tax return preparer. What we are seeing as far as the IRS is that taxpayers should be wary of preparers who won't sign the return. And I know you did mention that, like a ghost. They try to be invisible to the fact they prepared the return and will print the return and then get the taxpayer to sign it and then just mail it. And that's it. They never see them again. And then on the e-file side of the house, though, the ghost will prepare the return but refuse to digitally assign as the paid preparer. So those are the two things that we see within the IRS. Rebecca, what do you guys see?
Real quick, Christella, the point that you just hit on there. So if I'm the taxpayer, right, and I'm listening to this podcast and I'm thinking, oh man, did a ghost preparer do my return? Where would they look on the copy of their tax return to see if it was
That is a good question. Because by law, anyone who is a paid preparer or citizen preparing federal tax returns must have a valid Preparer Taxpayer Identification Number. We call that short PTIN. The paid preparers must sign and they must include this PTIN number on the tax return. Not signing a return from a preparer is a red flag for the IRS. We see it as them looking to make a quick profit by promising a big refund or charging fees based on the size of the refund. So again, it is so important that when either they're going to mail it or electronically, they must see that PTIN on that. And the taxpayer must sign the return as well.
Okay, perfect. And Rebecca, from the Franchise Tax Board, could you give your stance on ghost tax preparer and what you see or how to identify?
Yes, so we're seeing similar things exactly like what Christella has mentioned. In addition to what we warn is when taxpayers see handwritten information on their return. So perhaps that information is written on the return or they've put a business tag on it, like a return address kind of label on it. That's a red flag because you have to wonder if they're handwriting it on my copy, what did they submit to the IRS? Did it actually, did that information actually make it on the return? And a lot of times when we get complaints from individuals, when we ask them to send us a copy of the return, because on our end, we're not seeing anything. We're just seeing blank. It looks like it's self-prepared. And then we see the copy from the taxpayer and it has written information on it. So it's important that you ask them to see the actual return that's been submitted. If it's been handwritten, that's definitely a red flag.
And so, I mean, not having a copy of the 1040 that was submitted, that's probably a red flag too, right?
Yeah, you want them to give you a copy. You never want to sign a return and have them tell you, oh, it's more convenient and save you time if you just sign the return now. We'll submit all the paperwork for you. No, never sign a return that's blank. Always make that appointment to return or stay there while they're preparing the return.
That leads us into kind of the next question that I wanted to cover. But, what are typical issues, right? So if I'm a taxpayer and I say, well, this person did my return, I paid them $100, they filed it, it was sent to the IRS. What's the big deal? What's the issue? So if you guys could share any typical issues or things that you've seen pop up more on returns that have been done by ghost preparers, what are some of the issues that you've seen that could get a taxpayer in trouble?
Claiming fake deductions to boost the size of the refund is a big one. Income to qualify their clients for tax credits they really don't qualify for. Those are the things we see. What we see a lot also is the direct refund is that the tax preparer has the refund go to their bank account and not to the taxpayer's account. So it's so important when they look at that return and that they see that is their routing number and their bank account number on there. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them also require payment in cash, and they don't even provide receipts, So those are some of the things that IRS has been seeing.
Right. And a lot of times you'll get someone who conveniently puts it in an envelope for you. Before they do that, look at it. Are all of the dependents on there actually your dependents? And like Christella said, look at the routing number. Is that yours? If they say, oh, it'll come faster if you allow it to come into my bank account. However long it takes, it's better that it go to yours so that you can actually see how much has been provided by the IRS. Because a lot of times you'll find that the amount that you receive as a refund, when the IRS or FTB come knocking later on to say, we want our money back, and they say, we want all, this money, and you find out that you actually only received half of what the tax preparer actually got. And that, like Christella said, is because they added additional deductions and dependents, things that you didn't qualify for, or even dependents you don't even know. Just random people. And then you end up having to owe the money that you received plus the additional money that the IRS actually refunded that the tax pro pocketed.
That's scary, right? Because when the IRS gets that tax return sent to them, I mean, they're calling Brandon Chanley if there's an issue, right? They're coming to me. They're not going to who did my return. They're coming to me and saying, hey, you said this was good when you sent it to us, but it's not. So, Rebecca, do you have any examples or stories that you could kind of share of an issue that you've seen pop up on the FTB side that you could clearly see was probably a ghost prepare issue, but what's maybe an example or something that happened to that particular return?
Well, on our end, we do receive complaints through the CTEC website. And so we review those complaints to try to determine who the tax professional is, first off. Then a lot of times what happens, as I mentioned, they will show us a copy of the return and it isn't signed on our end. So then that allows us to look for additional clients that they may have had. I have the pleasure of being able to go out onto the field and meet tax professionals, and they share their stories with me. And a lot of their stories are of taxpayers who end up having to go see them because they were victims of fraud. And so, it's not only cost the money to have the tax return prepared initially by this fraudster, but now they have to pay someone else to fix the return and figure out with the IRS and FTB what actually was submitted. And that's a lot of time, money, and penalties that end up having to be paid because someone didn't ask the questions that they should be asking. And so that's what we're hoping to be able to get the community to understand is ask the questions. What are your credentials? What is my return going to look like? And then at the end, look at it so that you're aware that everything they submitted is accurate. So that's what I see when I'm out on the field is mostly people who have had to go to someone else to fix the returns.
That's a good point too. If you ask a question about a tax return and your tax preparer can't answer that question or doesn't want to give you the information, that's a major red flag. I can't stress that enough. That's your opportunity to walk away. Don't get yourself in that situation. If it feels weird and feels like things are not right, then it's probably not. I think that would be my kind of tip and takeaway for folks. But we know these scenarios have happened. So let's say we have a listener now that knows that some kind of fraud happened. What should they do if they are a potential victim of fraud or, got duped by a ghost tax preparer? What are their steps? What should they do?
Well, for the IRS side of the house, Brandon, we have the form 14157A. We have so many forms. And that's what the taxpayer needs to complete. And any other documents with a copy of the notice, because if there's a fraudulent return being filed, the IRS will send out the notice asking, is this your return? Please give us a call. There'll be a phone number on the top of that notice to call in. So they need to complete that form 14157-A and a copy of the notice and send it to the address that is on the notice or the letter that they get. Then make sure they complete all that. Now, if their Social Security number gets compromised, and that's another side of the house to that, then they're going to need to fill out the form 14039, which is the identity theft affidavit. So those are the two forms we would need. And if anything, call that number immediately on that notice. We are here to help with any questions that is regarding that return, because we want to be able to separate that fraudulent return and make sure that they get a proper return filed and they get the proper refund that they deserve to get.
So at the Franchise Tax Board, we do refer a lot of individuals as well to the IRS. We ask them to fill out the forms that Christella mentioned. In addition to that, if there is identity theft, any type of that fraud, we also ask them to contact their local authorities, go to see an attorney, someone who can assist them not only on the tax side, but on the law side of things. We ask them to also go to ctec.org, submit the complaint on the website that comes directly to us at enforcement at the Franchise Tax Board. They can also go to ftb.ca.gov. And at the top, there is a link for Tax Pros. Click there. You can search for fraud, and that will take you to additional steps for you to file complaints on fraud in regards to your tax professional. But as I also mentioned, we do like to refer them as well to the IRS. 14157 allows them to report any fraud in regards to the tax professional. So we let them know about that form quite a bit. And then we tell them, however, if there's additional fraud on the actual tax return, then as Christella mentioned, we really encourage them to do the 14157A, because that will also allow different parts of the IRS to review their tax returns.
And you can go to the IRS website at www.irs.gov. And then once you get to there, if you go to the search box and type in Identity Theft Central, that will take you straight to the homepage of everything that Rebecca just listed for them to go through. And all of the forms are all in there. And all they have to do is just click it, and it's a fillable form, and just print it and mail it in.
And one point that I'd like to make as well is there's a lot of fear. And I know that we've talked about this in previous podcasts, but I want to reiterate that it's important that you not fear coming to us and giving us the information, because we're unable to share any information, not only with the person who's reporting the fraud, but also the person they're reporting. We will not share information with anyone. However, if we need additional information, I do encourage them to please include their name and contact information, because if there's additional information that I need from the tax professional or about the tax professional that they're reporting, I need to be able to reach out to them and ask them those questions, because if I don't have enough information, then I have to close the complaint and the case is closed. And that person is going to continue to do the fraud that they're doing. So please give as much detail as you can, the person's name, address, phone number, anything information that can provide how much they paid. All of that information is very helpful, and include your contact information in case I have additional questions.
Great. That's a great tip. And that was actually one of the other questions I had too. But, if our listeners are out there right now, and let's say you hear this and say, man, did a ghost preparer do my return? I don't know if that happened or not. I think my recommendation, and Rebecca and Christella, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would look at that return. And if you paid somebody to do your return and it says self-prepared at the bottom of your tax return, or it's not signed at the bottom of your tax return, and you live in the state of California specifically too, your return was done by someone that shouldn't have been doing your return. Shouldn't have been taking money to do your tax return. Because of CTEC and because of what we do, they did not meet the parameters around doing that tax return. So if someone, they go and look at the return and they see that, where would be the quickest spot for them to go right now and to report, I may have had a return done by a ghost tax preparer. Can you make sure I'm not in trouble? Or can you help me? Where would you guys recommend they go first?
Well, for the IRS, like I mentioned, we had our homepage. If you go to www.irs.gov and then type in there Ghost Preparers, and then we have an actual, let me pull that up right now. We have a newswire release. It's 2021-30 that it tells them in detail to be aware of ghost preparers who don't sign returns. And it gives them instructions in there regarding the P10s. And tax return preparers may also ask them for certain questions. And sometimes, these tax preparers are getting a little smart here. They'll actually go in there, and what I've also heard from other preparers is that they'll hand them a blank tax return and just say, sign it. And then they, like Rebecca was saying, then when they get the letter or the notice from the IRS, there they are trying to find out. So the best way to start with the IRS, if they want to speak to someone, is to call our 800-829-1040 and start there. But my advice is to go to our homepage. Our homepage has all of that information in there instead of having to wait on the call site line. And again, and let me share that notice again with you. It's IR-2021-30. And that has a lot of information in there regarding ghost preparers and the direction of where all the taxpayers should go to. But also, Brandon, if I could say one more thing also, sure, is that, the IRS has a page where they can actually check the preparer's credentials and see if they are actually legit. So if you go to our homepage and type in Directory of Federal Tax Return Preparers with credentials, and it will come up on our homepage, and it will actually show them if they are going to someone, say John Smith, I'm just picking a name, and they don't see John Smith is on there, then that's a little red flag not to go to that tax preparer. And another thing that they should do is also see if that tax professional that's preparing their tax return actually belongs maybe to a professional organization, such as CTEC, CSCA, and all the other organizations, and check their credentials that way.
That's a good plug for ctec.org as well.
Exactly.
So ctec.org.
I'm going to say that to all of your listeners. Start there. Make sure they are legit, first of all, before you even go and make an appointment with them.
Yeah, and on the FTB site as well, go to ctec.org, file a complaint. The complaint will go directly to us at FTB's enforcement, or you can go to ftb.ca.gov, and on the top right-hand corner of the website, there is a link for tax pros. You can go there and get additional information on how to report them as far as fraud is concerned. But there is a lot of great information on both websites, FTB and the IRS, and I hope they will.
For sure. And, and again, we want to get information out to the public, want to let everybody know what to look for. If you're out there and you look at these things and you see your return was done by somebody that didn't sign it, right? And that happened last year. I would recommend when you go to do your return this year, I would definitely look for somebody that is registered with CTEC. Make sure you're going to the right folks. Make sure you're getting a good quality tax return done, because at the end of the day, like we said, if there's an issue with your return, you're going to be notified by the IRS. They're going to ask you specifically, not the person that didn't sign your return. Help yourself, right? Because you don't want to get in trouble. You don't want to have issues with the IRS and potential fraud issues down the road that could catch up to you.
Something else that I've noticed out on the field is that there are individuals who belong to certain membership organizations. As Christella mentioned, there are different groups. However, just being a member of these organizations doesn't necessarily mean that they have a credential that is in good standing or that they have a credential at all. So in California, you have to be registered with CTEC, or you have to have a license, a CPA license, an attorney license with the California State Bar, or an enrolled agent with the IRS. So if you see a very pretty certificate on the wall that says some type of accounting, then go to the Board of Accountancy and look them up to see if they actually have a CPA license.
Yep.
Go to the California State Bar, make sure that their attorney license is actually active. You can also contact the IRS EA enrolled agent number and ask them if their EA license is active or if it even exists. Because I do find a lot of times that they say, oh, well, they told me that they have this credential and they had a fancy certificate on the wall. And it turns out that it's from a membership group and they don't actually have that credential. So it is important that they take those extra steps. Those few minutes to check the license is very important and can be the difference between a good return and a return that ends up being completed by a fraudster.
Great information. Thank you. Well, I tell you what, that was the main questions that we had, and I think we've shared a lot of good information with the group here. So I just want to thank you guys for joining us. I appreciate your time. It's always good to get the experts on the phone and on the call and have them share advice. So you guys are great, and I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for inviting us.
You bet.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Always. Yeah. Thanks for joining us again, Rebecca. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I'm Brandon Chanley, and this has been Taxpayer Beware. We'll see you in the next episode.